Welcome to a new video. Let's take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. I hope you like them. The first story is called, "Okay Chef, Let's Do It Your Way." As always, the stories are written from the original poster's point of view. While I was studying, I started working for a successful bar, which also served gourmet wood-fire pizza. I was employed as a kitchen hand, and my main duties were helping on the pizza section during service, helping with food prep, dishwashing, and cleaning. After 6 months, I had slowly taken more and more initiative in the kitchen until I was eventually promoted to cook. This meant I learned how to cook all the dishes in the kitchen, even the fancy stuff. I would also usually run the kitchen on late-night service, with the help of a more junior kitchen hand. Around 1 year in, my boss, the head chef, decided we needed a better pizza dough recipe. He bought a dough recipe from a popular pizza place in my city, and it tasted great. But the problem was that it didn't last long in the fridge, which meant lots of wastage. So, head chef decided to tweak the recipe to make it last longer. He changed the type of yeast, and changed it to a cool proof instead of a warm proof, along with many other things. Now to give some context, by this point I had become one of the better pizza guys on the team, and quite a few of my colleagues had commented that the dough I made always came out the best, which I attribute to quite a few modifications I had made to the recipe over 12 months of working at it. I had changed almost every part of the recipe, except for the actual basic ingredients used. I made the recipe a bit more adaptable, too. If we suddenly needed an extra batch ready to use in 4 hours, I would make it completely differently than a batch that would sit in the cool room all week. I'm definitely no master baker, and I don't pretend to understand the microscale workings of the whole process, but trial and error and lots of repetition taught me a thing or two at least. Head chef never said a word about me quietly tweaking the recipe, because the feedback from the customers was almost always good, and he was getting all the credit. Head chef initially came across as a nice guy, pretty chilled out, but he was a terrible boss and very disorganized. This led to us never having the necessary stock to prepare all the menu items, and always having poor staffing ratios and skill mix. These faults alone would be forgivable. After all, he was a nice guy under a lot of stress, but he was consistently jerking staff members around. He promised full-time contracts that were never signed, pay rises that never hit the bank, staff parties that never happened, and constantly rostering us to work on days that we had specifically asked to have off. One chef was employed on a sponsored visa, meaning that if he lost his job, he would likely have to leave the country, and this poor chef got worked into the ground, basically abused, because the boss knew he couldn't do anything about it. Safe to say, morale got pretty low in the kitchen, and lots of the staff were looking for jobs elsewhere. It gets to Christmas, and it's end of year party time for a lot of businesses, which means our venue was booked out every day and night for a month. We had all been working crazy hours doing prep work, and while I was at home, finally chilling out after a double shift, my phone starts blowing up. Head chef is blasting us all on our work group chat because one of the batches of dough had turned out crappy. Not my batch, of course. He was demanding that we all had to follow the recipe to the letter. I spoke to head chef the next day, to remind him that we didn't have the right kind of yeast for that recipe, and to ask if we were having some delivered. Head chef told me I was to use the yeast we had, that it would be fine. I tried to point out that the original recipe was written for a different type of yeast and proofing method, but he shut me down pretty hard. "I'm the head chef here, and you're a dishwasher." I said it'll be fine. "Okay chef, let's do it your way." The next day I prepped 20 batches of dough, which for our small kitchen was a massive amount. On a typical weekend I would have gone through 1, maybe 2 batches, but for the next week all the customers had paid in advance and they wanted huge amounts of food for their end of year parties, and why not, when it's company coin? As explicitly instructed, I made all 20 batches exactly as stated in the original recipe, just like I'd been told. I used precisely 0 of my hard-learned tips and tricks. The first big night comes around, and I already know it's going to be a disaster. The dough is terrible. Like really, really bad. I seriously felt ashamed sending them out, but there was nothing to be done at that point. Then the feedback started coming in. It was not great, let me assure you. The next day, after presumably getting chewed out by one of the event organizers from the night before, head chef comes into the kitchen and tells us to throw away the entire week's worth of dough, and that we would all be offered overtime for as many additional hours we had to stay back to remake it all. We were almost exclusively on fixed rates until that point. On top of that, in a sublime piece of sweet satisfaction, I overhear head chef quietly tells the sous chef to get him to make it the other way before walking out of the kitchen. Sous chef is the aforementioned visa holder. He turns to me with a knowing grin and nothing more is said. I continued working in the kitchen until I completed my studies, mainly because the late night shifts rarely interfered with my curriculum, but almost all of the other staff moved on from that place. I'll never know just how much it cost the bar to replace all that dough, or how much revenue they lost reimbursing the customer, or how head chef explained it all to his corporate bosses. He probably blamed us. But I like to think he got exactly what he asked for. I have no experience in restaurant work, so maybe you can fill me in on something. Is it normal for a head chef to just buy recipes? The next story is called Berate Me in Front of My Principal for Not Communicating with You About Your Child's Grades. Enjoy embarrassing yourself. Flashback to my first year of teaching. I was a 21-year-old middle school teacher, fresh out of college and extremely green. I was admittedly shaky when it came to parent communication. It is quite intimidating to speak to a parent as an equal when you are less than 10 years older than their children. Many of them were old enough to be my parent, which made things awkward for me. Enter Mum. Her daughter, Diva, did absolutely nothing in my class except stir up drama, be extremely rude and obnoxious, and generally anything but do her work. Now, student grades are easily accessible at all times through an online parent portal, so I have always been of the opinion that parents should never be surprised by grades at the end of the quarter. So the end of the second quarter is drawing to an end, and I get an abrasive email from Mum demanding a parent and teacher conference with an administrator present. Of course, teachers are instructed to meet with a parent anytime they want a conference. One of my assistant principals sat in on the meeting. From the moment Mum sat across from me, I knew where Diva got her attitude. Mum was belligerent, accusing, and rude. She began to angrily accuse me of causing her daughter to fail, which was somehow my fault. Basically, I should have done everything under the sun to make sure she didn't fail. I should have contacted her early, I should have sent home extra copies, I should have been checking Diva's agenda, etc. While I admittedly should have called her early, her chewing me out in front of my boss was the most embarrassing moment of my career. My assistant principal worked out a compromise that went like this: since Mum didn't want a lot of phone calls, apparently a busy person, it was agreed that I would write a note to Mum in Diva's agenda every Friday about her grade and her missing work. Embarrassed and chastised, I could barely look my boss in the eye. I resolved that I would comply to the fullest, so much so that it would be annoying. I would be above reproach so that she could never berate me like that again. However, I never could have imagined the incredible events that followed. In the weeks that followed, I not only wrote in Diva's agenda, but I printed off lists of her missing assignments, progress reports, and letters home, and stapled them to her agenda. I did this every week, without fail, and Diva's behavior did not change. By the end of the third quarter, she was missing 8 assignments and was failing my class yet again. Lo and behold, I get an email from Mum demanding a parent and teacher conference with a principal present. She arrives and starts in on me again about how I'm unprofessional and how I'm not supporting her daughter, and how I had yet again failed to notify her that her daughter was failing. Then, the realization struck me: she had never looked at the agenda. I painstakingly stapled progress reports, letters, and missing work into her agenda for nearly 3 months, and she never once checked. A grin broke across my face. Can we look at Diva's agenda? There's something I think you should see. The mum leaves the room and comes back with Diva's agenda. I begin flipping through the agenda, showing her every single page that I wrote on or stapled. Now, if you'll notice, I have written in Diva's agenda and stapled progress reports, letters to you, and lists of missing work into her agenda every single week since we last spoke, as per our agreement. Are you telling me that you didn't check her agenda once? The blood drains from the mother's face as she realizes her credibility with my principal is now gone. At this point in the quarter, it is too late for your child to turn in make-up work. Please be sure to be checking your child's agenda every Friday for an update concerning her progress. In order for your child to be successful, you need to be involved. Do you have any questions? The mum is stammering with excuses and apologies for not checking. By this point, I could tell that my principal was stifling laughter, so I knew that I had won. Mum left very quickly, and I never received one of those harsh emails again. Diva's behavior didn't improve at all, but I rode the satisfaction of that W all the way through to summer. A reverse helicopter parent? She does nothing to help her daughter and expects the school to do everything? Is this normal? The last story is called, You Are Not Doing As Good as the Others. Why aren't you booking more people? So I work as what is best described as a traffic warden. I know, people are going to hate me, but either way. I've been doing this job roughly a year, and despite the abuse you get on the job, the 10-hour work days and average pay, it's been a rewarding job. I struggled to talk to people I didn't know. But since doing this job, it's really taught me, people are jerks and you shouldn't have to take their crap. Don't get me wrong, most people are actually kind to us and respect that doesn't matter what I'm doing, I'm working to make a living. But this story isn't about just some random person in the street, it's actually about the top dog, the boss in charge of all of our sector. So recently, I've been coming back at the end of the day with less parking tickets than my colleagues. It doesn't matter what we get, and we aren't allowed targets because it's against the law to. And it doesn't matter if you come back with 100 in a day or nothing. You get paid for your day's work. So I don't go out actively trying to get as many as I can, of course not, I'm not an absolute jerk like some belief. I just do what's in front of me, and take it as the day comes like we are supposed to. But as I've said, I've recently been getting slightly fewer than my colleagues. So I come into work this morning and my boss tells me he needs to have a word with me. He said that the head of parking, the top guy regarding our sector, have contacted him asking if I'm alright because I don't seem to be getting as many as other people. So he obviously thinks that I'm not working because I'm not making them enough money. I've been working here for a year and a half, never had problems before. People have come back doing a hell of a lot worse than I have and overall making us all look bad, and yet I'm being singled out for actually working? I may not get the most tickets, but I get the most accurate tickets. If you issue one incorrectly, you have to bring it back to the office with you. It gets marked down as a spoil and your issue accuracy is affected. This doesn't actually mean anything. It just means that the organization has to do some paperwork and do some bits to cancel the fine. Virtually everyone else comes back with at least one a week, if not up to like 3 a day. I've accidentally done this maybe about 3 or 4 times for the entire time I've worked here. My boss said to me that for this next week I will be going out with a senior officer to make sure I'm working. Right, okay, whatever. They'll see I work anyway, and I have no qualms with them, they are all nice guys. This whole situation I don't blame my boss for, or my seniors at all. As I said, they are really nice guys and I'm glad I work with them. In fact, as I write this, I'm most of the way through the day and my senior has already had 2 spoils today. See what I mean? So I'm currently out with one of my seniors, going through the day as I usually would. When we come to the car park where all the employees of the organization I work for park. In order to park there, you need a specific permit given out by the parking sector of the organization. So the employees from all the other sectors park there too. Now, I'm going around, my senior is behind me making sure I'm working when I get to a car. It's not got a permit, okay cool, that's an extra one today that I can show and say, look, I'm getting more tickets. When I hear my senior laughing behind me. He said, do you know whose car this is? I said I had no clue. He told me it belongs to the head of parking for the organization, and he was going to give me the satisfaction of booking it. So although it's tipping it down with rain, I wanted this so bad just as a fu to the top of the chain who has no clue what happens out on the street. And yes, while it's only a small victory, I now get to say, while he has complained that I'm not getting as many, he can't complain now that I am, even if it's his car. I'll update if I hear back from my boss as to whether I'm still of any concern to the top of the chain, that think I'm not working. A small victory, but doesn't matter, I feel a lot happier about this all anyway. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content. Let me know what you think about the stories in the comments section below. Have a great day. Bye bye.